A very warm welcome to my community. I'm Sherwood McCaskey, as always. An equally warm welcome to our viewers around the world, those of you who continue to follow us weekly via the World Wide Web. Now, it occupies a spot on a mound in the eastern corner of the parish of St. Philip, positioned to stand like a beacon so that those among the population who were lost could find their proverbial way home. And during the last 100 years, thousands have met here to worship and pray, to baptize their young, to be given in marriage, and to celebrate with loved ones at the end of life's journey. On November the 26th, 2022, this edifice, in its present incarnation, will celebrate 100 years of work and witness in this community. Yes, the church exists to serve the community. Without the community, there can be no church. That brings us to a presentation of my community, St. Catherine. George Griffith has been associated with this community for more than 70 years. A few moments ago, he went ahead of us and took up a position in the church where he will place the community in perspective. He will speak of that special magic, that special energy, and that life that has made St. Catherine so very special. It's over to you, Mr. Griffith.
St. Catherine's has always been a very closely knit community. It is, of course, it stands out in St. Philip, and we call ourselves Philippians. But St. Catherine's Church itself is one of 4 institutions which exercise considerable influence on the people over the years. We have the church itself. We have St. Catherine's School, a stone's throw away. We have St. Catherine's Social and Sports Club, although the people call it now St. Catherine's Sports and Social Club. But originally it was St. Catherine's Social and Sports Club. And then, of course, you had the plantation, Golden Grove plantation in particular. And I say that because as a boy, I remember very well dozens and dozens of men and women early on mornings around 7 o'clock on their way to Golden Grove plantation to work. And we used to refer to them as the Grove Gang. Men and women with forks and hoes and sickles on the way down to work. And during the course of the day, you would have Albertine Haynes with her large pail of mawbee on her head and her basket full of sweetbread and fish cakes and the like, going to see that they were refreshed. And then in the evening, they will make the trek back up. But what was so inspiring about that you see ordinary, everyday people in working clothes, generally a khaki pants, roll up, or the girls sometimes, the women sometimes will wear a longish dress, long sleeves, sometimes a pants to protect them from the cane blades and all of those things. But this community, church, and especially St. Catherine's Social and Sports Club, held this community together. We had leaders like the founders of St. Catherine's. People talk about Chesley Blaze, but I know him as Lionel Harcourt Will Chesley Blaze, who worked at the Government Industrial School as a cook for many years, but he was even more than that. Then you had Ulrich Jordan, who had one of the few motor cars, P96, and you didn't have taxis and so on in those days, so if a person was getting married, P96, if there was a funeral, P96, if people were going to leave the island and therefore had to go to the airport, it was Ulrich Jordan. So and he was one of the founders of St. Catherine's. And then you had Cephas Walker, diminutive man, but he was a printer. He had a place which we call the office. It was the printery, 2-story building on the edge of the cliff east of Marley Vale. He printed all of the the ledgers and books and forms for the plantations all around St. Philip and beyond. And as little boys, we would gravitate to the office because Cephas Walker, he lived to be more than 90 years old. And he introduced us to what was called a pink gin. And he loved gin and tonic. So if you had gin and you pour a little cola tonic in there, it became pink. And the boys became accustomed to a pink gin. And of course, a little dash of salt sometimes. But we learned so much from those fellas. And then you had Selwyn Blades, known as Broxy Blades. He was a teacher first, but then he was head of the home agricultural station. His wife was Muriel Blades, who was a teacher here and then at St. Mark's. And they lived in the community. And then you had Joseph Maxwell, Neville Maxwell's father, and Merle Maxwell and so on. And he was the organist at Shrewsbury, but he also was a teacher. So these were the people who gave and you had Eddie Batson, who lost a hand. I don't know how, but these were the men in St. Catherine's. And in those days, if you went to a club meeting at St. Catherine's, shirt tail had to be in, and it was decorum. And you had to learn parliamentary procedure. You had to be able to get up and address the chair. And there were points of orders, and the chairman will adjudicate accordingly. And those were the things that happened, and I think that contributed a lot to the discipline in the society. And if you walk through Marleyvale or on your way to school, there was always someone who would put you right. People sometimes talk about if you did something, somebody will flog you and send you home, and your parents will flog you again. I didn't know that. And I'm 73 years of age, and I never saw that happen. So that was some romanticism that people project into the future. But I do know that people could chastise you, and they could complain for you. Another thing was, in this community, we played a lot. And on a moonlight night, the way the Marleyvale was structured, it wasn't all the houses were not on the main road in those days, but houses were what we call in the alley, side roads and so on. And on a moonlight night, we loved the moonlight nights because the older folks would come out and sit in front of the house. And we, the young ones, would be running around playing hide and seek and all kind of things. So, and after the crop season, people, there was a lot of peasant farming too. So people will rake the trash out of the fields, especially if they were going to fork the field up and plant something else. So you had these large trash heaps. And sometimes we would burrow our way through the trash heaps and hide. And it is alleged, I don't know, that very often a young lady would find a young fella in the trash heap. And I am not certain what happened, but we look forward to that. And you don't really admire the moonlight now. In those days, the old folks would be sitting down on benches and buckets and steps watching us. And if they missed somebody for too long a period of time, they'll just shout out the name to ensure that all was going well. In the 1950s and well into the 60s and even the early 70s, the boys in the community literally roamed the community. And not in a negative way. We went fishing in the pond at Golden Grove, or what we call the river, to catch carps and eels and crayfish. And then all the way up to Culpeper Island, what we call Man Bay. We followed the water, and you could always find freshwater fish. And if we were going to do freshwater fishing, we had to get what we call dirt worms. So we had to dig around the water's edge, and we catch those dirt worms. And then we passed what was called the Planship. The Planship was a beach. People didn't really bathe in the Planship, but certainly Man Bay, which was Culpeper Island. And we would swim out to Culpeper Island. And when the tide was low, we could even walk out there. Yes, and that was on a Sunday afternoon. You had lunch, Sunday lunch, and families then went off to the beach. Above Marleyvale was called Baker's Beach, and that was well populated. where the boys would duck the girls. In other words, you held them up high and pushed them underneath the water, and that was fun for us. And the adults would keep a close watch to see that nothing untoward happened. And interestingly enough, in those days, a lot of the girls did not wear any bathing suits. I think the development was not as early as it is now. But boys went in the sea naked, girls too, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. And in CA season, we would leave home in the mornings and we would play cricket. Marleyville, would play Clarksville or East Point and so on. And we traveled all the way down to a place called Rawlings, which is way below Golden Grove. And we would name our teams after the county teams in England. Berkshire and Hampshire and so forth. And we would play cricket there. And then we go to another district and we play cricket again. Then we go on top the Bay Hill, we call it the Bay Hill, overlooking Baker's Bay, we play cricket again. And then we would all arm ourselves with a spoon and maybe a pack of soda bix or Eclipse biscuits. And we would go down to the beach where the men were breaking the sea eggs. And men would give you what they call a couple of cups. In other words, about 3 or 4 sea eggs, we call them cups. And you take your spoon and you hit them and pry them open. You scoop out the rolls of sea egg, put it on top of your biscuit, and then you eat that. And men would gladly give you those. So young boys roam, and of course fruit trees were raided. But if someone complained, then you stop. I remember East Point had a lovely dunks tree. And the girls would stay at school, and the boys would go up to East Point and pick all the dunks and come back and give to the girls. I never did it, but one day I went with the boys, came back with a pocket full of dunks. And from the time I climbed up the hill and got to the school, all the girls flocked for these dunks. And I go into my pocket, I give dunks, and I had none for myself. Golden Grove had this pond, and these trees, we call them monkey apple trees. The apple was a bright yellow when it was ripe, but you could smell it from far. And you would break it open, and it had seeds almost like the sugar apple seeds, and you would eat those. Now, the thing about that was those trees were perched over the pond. So if you went up into that tree, and there were any mistake, you would drop straight into the pond. So those are the beautiful things that we had. So we grew up in a community where people shared. I know my brother went to the modern high school, and in order to pay his school fees, which was $22 a term at that time, my mother would keep pigs and goat for milk and so on. And if you were going to be paying that school fee, you had to butcher that pig and get it out and get your money in time to pay that school fees. So my job was to go out and order the pork. And we know that Mr. Murrell in Marleyville would always take a leg. Lloyd Clark would always take a shoulder. And then people would call for various other things, the flank and those kind of things. So once you got the head ordered and the leg ordered, it was easy going. And on the morning that the pig was going to be killed, you'd get up very early and you had this massive pot and you have the fireplace set up and the wood underneath there and the fire light up, because you'd have to do that before the butchers come. And a fellow called Glenville Lyon, he was one, and Charlie Briggs, that's not his correct name, and then Prince Jordan, whom we always called Brady. Well, when those three came, it was human non-stop. First of all, they had to have a few drinks first, while the water is being boiled. And when the water finally boiled, the issue will be getting the pig out of the pen. And of course, the pig is going to resist. The pig somehow had some inclination that something was happening. And very often, they will wrestle the pig to the ground. Sometimes everybody get cat spraddle. But the thing is now you must get the pig on its back. So somebody will hold the hind legs, somebody will hold the front legs, and the pig sometimes is resisting, and sometimes if your hand slip off the leg, then you get a big kick in your chest and you go on flying. But these men now will make this cut, and after it was all finished, the fellas will look at the heart. And depending on whether or not you were able to strike the heart in the middle will determine how good you were. And the fellas argued about that too. And of course, the swallow pipe will be taken out and put into the fire, because when all is said and done, you're going to brush off the ashes, and everybody wants a piece of the swallow pipe. And the old lady would have to have that water ready. Crocus bags, because you put the crocus bags on the pig and then pour the hot water on, because you can't burn it too much. But the bag will keep the heat in, and when you hold the hair comes off in your hand. And you scrape that pig until all the hair was off, and then the fellas would then string it up and cut it down the middle. And then you would take out the liver and the heart and all of those things, and then you start to cut up and weigh, and the beer feed bags. You wrap them up, and you write Mr. Murrell, 1 leg, X pounds, and you off to deliver that. And you were always happy when they paid the same time. Some people would pay at the same time. Some people would take the pork, but it would be a bit of a challenge to get the remainder of the money. But the point is, that is how we were. So this family would kill a pig today, the next family tomorrow, another family, so that people supported each other. And that is what I know about this community. And then you had Albertine Haynes. She's buried in the churchyard there. She lived to be 103 or 4. But she was the woman who baked the coconut bread on a Sunday. And then you had Iris, Miss Beckles' sister Iris. She baked too, but she was not as popular as Albertine. Albertine had one of these wood ovens. You had what looked like a coal pot, but then built around the coal pot it was insulated, and on the outside was wood, and you had this door. So you prepare the dough and so on, but most of all, the coconut, because that loaf of bread had almost a diagonal cut across it, and in that was stuffed this coconut, hence the coconut bread. And everybody on a Sunday would line up. You go very early. If you didn't go early enough, you would have to wait for a second batch, and she sold that. And the community life was like that. But then on a Saturday, St. Catherine's, cricket. I played for St. Catherine's too, and as one of the captains of St. Catherine's and all that. But before my time, the men would roll that pitch, and depending on which team you were playing, the fellas would know what to do in order to get the pitch to suit James Strawn, whom we call Watchy, who was a fast bowler, one of the best fast bowlers we had around here. And you will have your pitch set. Now, the women like Edna Miller and Trudy Jordan and all of those people would go down with their trays, because people watched cricket in those days. The entire community would come down, so that you had trays set at various places, and you have the comforts and the toffees and, you know, the fish cakes and all those things. And they would be around the field. And we sometimes felt sorry for people who were seeking to beat St. Catherine, because in those days a match could be broken up very easily if the umpire made the wrong decision. So that if you struck a beautiful 4 or 6, those women will leave the tray, run off on the field, and put something in your hand to put in your pocket. So that was the community, and everybody came out. And there were certain teams that, although it was friendly rivalry, sometimes the rivalry outstripped the friendliness of the game. And the men around the field would have the nip bottles and the 3 gills bottles and all of that, and they'd be drinking and arguing, and sometimes the lower the content of the bottle got, the louder will be the volume. And that was how it went. And there was an umpire, he used to drive a tractor. but he was known as Gall Fowle. And Gall Fowle once said to someone, if you get hit on your tongue, I'm going to give you out. And of course, that riled up the crowd, so anything he did was trouble. I remember my first game for St. Catharines, though, against Victoria from St. Martin's. There was a man called Bear Bruce who would play in his cap. He would never take off his cap. Some people said he had no hair on his head, but Bear Bruce had on this cap. And it was what we call a salty dog wicket. In other words, rain fell, you had no covers in those days. Rain fell and you're going to put the bagasse on the wicket and you roll it in. So I went, in those days I batted in the lower order because I was a fast bowler. And this ball, Bear Bruce running with this ball, and not knowing what the wicket will do, I just putted forward and played the ball defensively. And in the process, stepped out of my crease. And Bear Bruce said, little fella, man, try and pat down where that ball hit. You're gonna like chop you next time. I stepped out of the crease and my stumps knocked down. Run out. So those were the things you remember. As long as I played cricket, I remember Bear Bruce. He was a fierce, fast bowler coming out of St. Martin's. I don't know what became of him. But all of the boys aspired to playing cricket for St. Catharines. And we all grew up. We started to play for St. Catharines. Some people went on who were working at banks, bureaus, went on to banks, bureaus, but they were always St. Catharines men. And then there was the BCL days. And then there was a big controversy. I made a big error at that time. I was regarded as a community leader. I commanded the support of all the young people because in 1967 we formed the Clarksville Progressive League, which later became the Clarksville Social Club. And that was the same year, 1967, that I set a Barbados record in the half marathon. And that's another story. And at that time, the St. Catharines Club was playing BCL all the years from 1934. Casuarina trees all around, and we had a clubhouse and out toilet, and dances were held there, and so forth. But then Wiltshire's estate was being sold out. A fellow called Polly Kinch, I think he's still alive, he might be quite old now, but he was in charge. And the management of the club decided to meet with these developers. And we, the young fellas in the club, literally had no say. And I remember the big meeting where people came, the officials came, minister came at the time, Edwy Talma, and so on. And the president of the club and those fellas up on the platform are really, really young fellas sitting down. And the plan was that Wiltshire's estate was being sold out. And St. Catharines Club was on Wiltshire's estate. Originally, it was put there for the benefit of the tenants of Wiltshire's. But Wiltshire's has so few people, so Marley Vale really dominated the place. And the plan was to give us a spot in Bayfield. I resisted that. I mean, if fellas research it now, you'll find newspaper articles where we challenged them and so on. And in the end, Ranald Reach was the member of Parliament at the time. In the end, the decision was taken. But on reflection, I am the first to admit that I was wrong. I did not see the vision they had. But the point is, if they had come to us and say, look, Wiltshire's is now sold. The Noels who own Wiltshire's selling this place out. But we are not obligated to, but we're going to give you a spot in Bayfield. They never did that. So I opposed them. And then we went down, played BCL, and then BCA second division, then intermediate, and then first division. And St. Catharines Club, as you know, a name for itself. At that time, then, BCA then brought in, after a while, many years, brought in this rule that St. Catharines had to resort to 3s and 4 boundaries, as opposed to the 4 and the 6. And we felt that was not so good because the folks at that time owned Thickest Plantation. I think they were the Wards. And in order to get back to 4 and 6, you had to expand the field by this number of yards and so on. And I was very active in the club in those days. And we went to them, and a number of people negotiated, and they offered to give us the additional land to make it a 4 and 6 boundary again. And you had to literally, if you're bowling from the north, you literally ran up a hill. And if you're bowling from the south, the hill was not, because the cricket pitch was elevated above the level of the field. And Louis Greenwich, who is now dead, who played for Windward, who lived at Ragged Point, Louis Greenwich offered to assist us with that. But in order to do that, we needed a proper compass. And Philip Goddard lent me his pilot's compass because he was a pilot. And Louis Greenwich came and they stake out the field to make sure it was exactly north to south. And the field was level, so you have the beautiful level pitch now that you have. So St. Catharines went back to 4 and 6, went on to win the Division 1 competition and so many other things. People like Trevor Clark and all those boys made important contributions.
And that should be the wish of all of us, that someday someone would look back at our work and contribution in whatever field and sum it up by saying that we went on to make important contributions. Your community story is important. You must preserve it. And one way of preserving your community story is by sharing it with all. Your shared stories could serve to inspire Barbados. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Thanks for your time.